Hello, and welcome to the Cannabis Man podcast. Thank you for clicking on the show. I'm Don Kleppen. And if it's your first time here, this is a podcast where we try to take a journalistic look at all things cannabis as laws are changing around states in America and the world at large. Different countries are legalizing cannabis medicinally and recreationally for adults. I wanted to start this show because I felt, I live here in Illinois. I've been a personal cannabis user for almost 20 years, somewhere between 15 and 20. Memory's a little foggy, you know how that goes, but either way, I've been a personal cannabis user for a long time, and I've been a professional broadcaster, journalist for over a decade now. And as things were getting more and more legalized in states and countries around the world with cannabis, I felt like the conversation was still missing something. Like there were more jokes, more punchlines about cannabis, out of Cheech and Chong movies than there were discussions about what cannabis actually could do for people's quality of life. There still really isn't much understanding in the broad public, in the general population. There's not much understanding or certainly knowledge about what cannabis can and can't do, or about what it can bring to your life, how it can improve your quality of life. More than that, there's a much better understanding of what, the sort of caricatures of the stoner that Hollywood's cranked out, and some of the lingering stigma of reefer madness and the Harry Anslinger, U.S. first drug czar, all the propaganda about cannabis and the DARE education, all of that stuff is still lingering, and that stuff is a lot more prevalent in the average American and global citizen's mind than an understanding of what the cannabis plant can actually bring to your life and what it can do for you. So that is part of what led me to start the Cannabis Man podcast, and since I started on 4/20 of 2022, I have been sharing with you news articles talking about headlines around Illinois and around other states and countries around the world related to cannabis. I've been sharing some cannabis events that you can go to if you're interested in finding out more, that have some showcases of great new businesses, new cannabis products, and new people who are jumping in the industry, or people who've been involved in a long time already that are just kind of moving from the legacy side of things into the new legal dispensary sort of recreational markets kind of a thing. And it's very exciting. There's stuff changing every day. And I have a great episode for you this week as well. Two guests on this episode. They are both part of some different groups. One of the groups was True Social Equity in Cannabis. The newer group that they're a part of is Weed the People, THA People. And they basically have been leading protests and demonstrations around the country, different states, and pointing out some of the states, including Illinois, which are from the beginning have sort of touted an interest in a social equity component of their legal cannabis markets, but as these guests say, in a lot of ways have really been falling short of those goals of social equity. And so my guests today have a lot to talk about in terms of what their demands are, what they're looking for from these states that profess to care about social equity in the legal cannabis markets. They talk about what they'd actually like to see from these states, and obviously as the federal government weighs decriminalizing and legalizing cannabis, they would very much like to see these goals, these social equity components top of mind, and that's a little bit about what our conversation has to do with today. Of course, I've got the news joint wrap as well as some other articles and topics that I thought were worth bringing to your attention on this week of Thanksgiving, and I'd like to bring all of that to you. Before I get into it, however, I would like to thank everyone very much for leaving the ratings and reviews and subscribing to the show. It has really made a big difference in terms of the engagement that I've received. Some of the numbers are starting to change. Getting word out about this show is what I've been trying to do, and I really need your help with that. So thank you to everyone who's helped me so far. If you're listening to this right now and you have not rated or reviewed the show, do me a favor. Go ahead and whatever platform you're using to listen to this, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeart, whatever it is, scroll up to the top of the show page and hit that ratings button and go ahead and leave however many stars you think this show is worth. I would much appreciate 5-star reviews, but whatever you feel like giving, I'm okay with it. But anybody who hasn't left a rating or review, please do me a favor and do that, because it definitely helps the show stand out from all the great podcasts that people are creating out there, and certain platforms have started to notice this show and highlight it on their picks for the week and their reviews and whatnot. So all of that really, really helps me, and I can't do it without you. So So thank you all so much for sharing the show. I really appreciate everyone's engagement with it. And a final note, the interview in this episode does contain some strong language. Listener, I decided not to omit anything that my guests said for the most part, and I decided not to bleep out the swears either. So if you've got anybody sensitive to that sort of language or younger listeners, just keep that in mind as the interview goes. And with that, let's kick off this 30-second episode of the Cannabis Man podcast. Here we go. That is the theme song right there, courtesy of my man Yusu Kim, aka Good Son. You can hear more of his great stuff at I Am a Good Son on Instagram. He usually releases stuff there. I think he's got a new single out as well, so definitely go check out Good Son. He always has great music, and I appreciate the theme, Yusu. I've gotten a lot of compliments on that, and I hope whenever you're listening to this, listener, that theme song helps cultivate a good vibe and just kind of puts you on a good wavelength for the rest of the day. It certainly does me. Before I get into the rest of this episode, listener, I just wanted to send a big shout out and congratulations again to my sister Kelly. She gave birth over the weekend to my nephew Landon James Kleppen. He was born Saturday, November 19th at 9:49 p.m., 7 pounds, 14 ounces, 20 inches long. And I got to meet the little guy and hold him on Tuesday. He's a beautiful baby, and a big congratulations again to my sister Kelly and her wife Jen. They have a beautiful baby boy, Landon, and welcome to the world. It is an exciting place, little guy, and it's getting better all the time. Now let's get into the news joint wrap. I really need to make some kind of opener, an open sound effect or something, a little bed for this news joint wrap segment, kick it off here. But this is a segment brought to you by IllinoisNewsJoint.com. Think of it as the joint you can hit for all your Illinois cannabis news and reviews. And let's start with Illinois has awarded $1 million in social equity cannabis loans to Helios Labs. Helios announced this week the company secured the first loan from Illinois Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity. The Cannabis Social Equity Loan Program from that department, it's designated for license holders that qualify under the social equity applicant category. The minority-owned craft cannabis growers located in Broadview, Illinois, got a $1 million loan from Good Tree Capital, a Chicago-based financial institution providing loans and now a digital wallet for cannabis companies to store and use their funds. The Cannabis Social Equity Loan Program was created to help social equity license holders access capital, which has been one of the main barriers to entry. As a matter of fact, you'll hear more about this in my interview today with my guests. They talk a lot about the barriers to entry and how much the state asks for in terms of anybody applying to hold a social equity license to distribute cannabis. It might just be anybody who's looking for a cannabis license. I don't know if the barriers to entry are different for social equity applicants versus non, but either way, the barriers are pretty high, and the need for capital for anybody who is looking to get into this is there 100%. And so this is a very exciting development here, and Helios Labs is the first group to benefit by getting this $1 million loan, courtesy of Good Tree Capital. Helios Labs is a craft cannabis company with a cultivation and manufacturing facilities located in Broadview. It's minority and veteran-owned company working closely with the 1937 Group, which is a company committed to creating opportunities for others whose voices often get overlooked. That's a quote. As one of the first social equity craft growers issued a license in Illinois, Helios Labs is, quote, authentically Chicago and poised to be one of the first to market. Next story, December cannabis events head indoors. That is a good thing, as it is cold as heck outside now around Illinois. If you're here, you already know that, and if you're not, stay away for a few months. Stay away until March-ish. April really is now when it gets warm again, but either way, the cannabis events are heading heading indoors now. Oh, we actually have one today that this comes out. This is November 25th. The Rise Lounge is set to host its Black Light Party starting at 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. It's an all-day event. Participants can RSVP on 7 rooms. It's a free event. Each table will be guaranteed for a 2-hour limit. All products must be purchased inside Rise Lounge. On November 30th, Tony P's Cannabis Industry Networking Night, set for 6 to 9 p.m. in the Electric Hotel on 222 West Ontario in Chicago. That'll be the host of the event. The Aroma Grow Store fall schedule has released its free classes. You can see those several dates. They're available throughout the month of December. December 4th, Brunch of Stoners is set to host its Winter Haze event. Join industry and community influencers for brunch, as well as a brunch buffet, winter mocktails, interview activities, and holiday games and more. This is running from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. in the West Loop. On December 10th, Bloom's Brothers Hydro, which is in the Apple House at 2611 South Harding in Terre Haute, Indiana. You'll hear more from Bloom's Brothers Hydro. I just interviewed Fred Sanders, and I'll be publishing that interview in the next few weeks. But right now, they've got an after-hours education event on December 10th. It starts at 5:45 p.m. They're calling it an after-hours Nectar Sesh. I love that name. It's already fully booked, though a couple spots could be available if inquired, according to Bloom's Brothers Hydro. It's only 7 miles from the Illinois border, and they're offering a lot of great grow products, which again, you'll hear more about in my interview with Fred Sanders. And the last one, December 10th, Rise Lounge is hosting its holiday cocktail class, sponsored by Up Elevated Cocktails and Can, 3 times for the event, 3 to 4:30 p.m., 5 to 6:30, and 7 to 8:30. You're guaranteed 2 hours at the table by buying a reservation there. All products, again, have to be purchased inside the Rise Lounge in Mundelein. That is for both of those events. The Rise events are at the Rise in Mundelein. And finally, Planet 13 selects Waukegan dispensary location. Planet 13 Holdings Incorporated announced earlier this week it submitted its proposed Illinois location to the Department of Financial and Professional Regulation and local regulators for approval. Its dispensary location for Fountain Square in Waukegan. The build-out and opening for the location is conditioned on approvals from state regulators and the city of Waukegan, but there's a quote here from the co-CEO of Planet 13, Bob Grosbeck. He says, "It is in a prominent shopping center with multiple stores, restaurants, hotels, and a recently announced casino project. It's off the 94 highway between Milwaukee and Chicago. Planet 13 is a vertically integrated cannabis company with cultivation, production, and dispensary operations in Las Vegas and in Orange County, California. Planet 13 also holds a medical marijuana treatment center license in Florida and a 49% interest in Planet 13 Illinois, which holds a provisional social equity justice involved dispensing license in the Chicago region. According to Planet 13, its mission is to build a recognizable global brand known for world-class dispensary operations and a creator of innovative cannabis products." And you can find out more about Planet 13, as well as all those events I mentioned coming up in the month of December, as well as that cannabis social equity loan program that Helios Labs just got, courtesy of Good Tree Capital. All of that and more is at IllinoisNewsJoint.com. Before we get into the guest interview this episode, listener, I wanted to mention my cannabis and coffee regimen is still very strong this morning. I'm loving it, but I'm just still hitting on the love affair from last week. I've just managed to make that last, and I wanted to ask you if you have any strains that you would recommend. If you had a great experience with some cannabis product, I don't care where it is. I don't care if it's Illinois, Colorado, California, Michigan, wherever you got yourself some good cannabis product and you had yourself a good experience, let me know about it. I want to hear about your cannabis experiences as well. All you got to do for this is click on the question or comment link in the show description notes. If you scroll down there, there's a link that says question or comment. Just click on that. It'll take you to Gallus FM, and you can leave a reply, you can leave a question, you can even leave a voice comment if you want to end up possibly on the show. I'd love to play some of those, and even if you don't, I would love to just hear some of the experiences that people are having, and maybe give me some ideas as some products to try and bring on the strain of the week here. So do me a favor and scroll down and hit that question or comment link and engage with the show. I'd love to hear from you. And if you're thinking about cannabis products, Black Friday is today after all, and the holidays are coming up. Maybe thinking about some gifts to get for the stoner in your life. And if so, head to 420pipes.com. You can scroll down in the show description notes to the end of it there, the footer. I've got a link to 420, or you can just Google the numbers 420 pipes and head to the website. Nick Thomas there has an excellent setup. They have an initiative called Smoke Local, where basically you can input your zip code if you so choose. Look for head shops that are around you. If you've got some great old stoners that run a head shop in your neighborhood and you want to support them, but maybe it's too cold outside, maybe it's just a little too much to make the trip, maybe you don't feel like spending an hour looking through the glass displays, you can select the local dispensary of your choice and you can buy their products right on 420pipes.com. Also, you can not support a local dispensary and you can look through all the excellent products that Nick Thomas has up there. Lots of different products there, grinders, bowls, bongs, if you're looking for glass, wood, or acrylic. Check out one of those new CS Drift bongs that I shared a video of recently, and it's made of acrylic. It's made around Chicago, lightweight, with these dual carb hole clearers. Instead of needing to pull the slide out of the bong, all you got to do is put your fingers over the two holes like a bowl and then clear it. And it's so lightweight. I love the acrylic. It's such a game changer. So that's the CS Drift bong, and that's just one of the many amazing products they have at 420pipes.com. Use the code CannabisMan to knock 10% off your cart order. And remember, when you're thinking about 420, think about 420pipes.com. Listener, my guests today, and yes, I said guests, we're doubling up again on this episode. Very excited to do so. They're both very knowledgeable about cannabis, and the two of them are passionate about the topic enough that they're involved with the group True Social Equity in Cannabis. And that group had some press conferences over the last several months and put out a lawsuit naming a few different states because of the way that their legal cannabis markets have been rolling out policies in terms of the licenses issued and in terms of how things are just going in those with related to cannabis sales and the social equity component of trying to end the war on drugs and bring cannabis into the legal fold. Listener, please welcome Anna Rose and Vi Herring with True Social Equity. Welcome, ladies.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I kind of like to get to start these interviews off just by getting to know you a little bit. If you'd like, Anna, you can go first, and then Vi, if you guys just want to speak a little about cannabis and how it came into your life and why this is an important issue for you.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm almost 40. So and I actually grew up in Houston, Texas. So, with the DARE program, there's a lot of stigma around it. And my high school boyfriend, I remember he smoked a joint at prom and I got so upset.
Wow.
But then 2 years later, I'm a pothead. I moved to Chicago for college and I was just so depressed, and I found cannabis and I started using it. I went to an art school, so I was like constantly busy, barely got any sleep. And on weekends, I was, trying to memorize lines, but cannabis was the only thing that really kept me not really, really, really depressed. I also have an inflammatory disease, and I didn't realize at the time it was also helping my inflammatory disease.
Wow. So
yeah, I'm at this point, that was in 04 that I really started smoking like every weekend. 05, I became an everyday smoker, and that's just what I am today.
Never looked back. I like it. How about you, Vi? How about yourself?
I'm originally from Kansas City, Missouri. I've been into the plant medicine since I was 14 years old, growing up in the inner city, in an urban city, and I've been into it since I was a kid. I'm 42. It just kind of came with the environment and the culture and growing up in an urban community. From then on, what brought me to the legal side is that once Illinois decided that, or not even Illinois, once, the United States decided that they were going to start allowing medicinal wellness through cannabis. Of course, somebody from the legacy market, I'm also a cannabis grower from the legacy market. Of course, I was like, wait a minute, I'm not going to go to jail for selling plants and distributing that.
Right.
Me and all my people constantly get, profiled or incarcerated or just held up from doing this very thing that now it's legal to do. Absolutely. I want to apply. I didn't really care about a retail because I was doing that anyway. You know what I mean?
Sure.
But as far as having a license to grow, to me, I was like, this is a great opportunity to not only just go legal and not have to constantly look over my shoulder, but also to be able to have a well business that I can grow on a multi-state level. Unfortunately, that's not what happened.
Right.
With the debacle and everything that has gone on. But what has made it important for me, not so much just being affected by the war on drugs, but, I suffer from different ailments where I'm also ex-military. So, I have anxiety, PTSD, and depression, as we all probably do in some form or fashion, living in a world of oppression just underneath the system. But beyond that, my husband died from a morphine overdose taken as prescribed and given as directed from the hospital. But because he came home after an 8-day stay in the hospital, he died in his sleep for 8 hours, and the hospital was found not negligent. And so thinking about opioids and our opioid crisis, it was even more imperative for me to make sure that I was on the front lines as an advocate and activist in how it is that this rollout was going to happen. My mom also died of cancer. She had leukemia, and it was an acute case of it. So I have a lot of other people that have ailments and some that have been terminally ill, and had they had this type of medications, things might have been a little bit different.
Yeah, I completely understand that. And that's a lot to go through for anybody. And it definitely makes sense, how involved cannabis is in your life. I can totally understand that. And I've spoken with some other guests too about how viable cannabis is medically as an alternative for things like opioids, for things that are absolutely prescribed. And, the big pharma is a huge part of the continued resistance that we're still facing as to a fully federally legal cannabis market, for sure. And what you were both just mentioning kind of segues nicely into the illegal cannabis as it stands. Obviously, we're still facing a federal prohibition. So different states have kind of started as they can to form their patchwork of legal markets, but nothing is able to work well together, and every state has a different idea about what's most important or what the issues that they need to face head on when they legalize are. Can you just talk a little?
Yeah, it's not working because they didn't utilize the ecosystem that currently existed to help people heal. And I like that Vi addressed, being someone that has been doing that. Like, there are so many women that are in this industry that went in it to help people that are being left out. I mean, there's not just women. There's so many people that are still being criminalized for helping people with a healing plant because of this limited licensing bullshit that we all know has been lobbied by these huge corporations. It's the same stupid stamp that they do every single time with corporatization, and it's got to go. This is a plant. This is natural medicine, and it will not stand.
But to your point, Don, one of the reasons that has occurred is because big pharma, big tobacco, big government from the very beginning has wanted to monopolize and have their hands into how medicinal plant life was going to occur. If people actually do their research, they would know that when those truth commercials were coming out over 15 years ago, 20 years ago about big tobacco was already planning and creating their process on what it would be like for cannabis and to now be as a industry or a consumer market on a wide scale. In addition to that, the reason why we even got to this point was because they had to address the war on drugs. There was no way that big cannabis or even legalization could occur without first addressing that. And trying to utilize cannabis as a way to do that really was a political scheme at the end of the day. It was never about the medication or the patients or the health benefits or even the renewable resource of the plant. It was always about being able to create another engine, another economic engine that affects masses of people as far as use, and then control it so that lots of money could then be repurposed back into where it is that big government, big tobacco, big pharma sees fit.
Right. I totally agree with that as well. And you can, to your point, as you were just saying, that it's not about health. It's not about the patients or their well-being. It's about money. I think all you have to do is look at the healthcare system and how it operates in the U.S. today to understand that that's the truth. I mean, if the pharmaceutical companies can prescribe somebody 5, 10 different substances to address different symptoms, and then those substances elicit other symptoms that then need to be prescribed additional medication for. And if all of this could be addressed by one plant, cannabis, obviously that it flies right in the face of their business model, which is why they have the lobbying and they're fighting so hard to keep this from going on. So right there with you, and I totally agree with that. And it's a big thing that does need to be conquered, I would say. Can let's name the states that you guys have pointed out in the lawsuit here. The lawsuit that the group has at least the one that I know for Illinois, is it accuses certain corporations and it accuses basically of actors of creating a monopoly in different states. Can you, would you mind just sort of tell us the states that are most egregiously violating the principles of a socially equitable cannabis market and what needs to change about them, if you can?
Well, I don't know that we brought up other states, although we can talk about that. I think it was just specifically Illinois focused.
Okay.
And just so you know, we did have to drop that case, unfortunately.
Oh, I see. Oh, okay. No, that's good. I'm glad you mentioned that, because that, as we talked about leading up to the interview, our communication's been going for a couple of months now, and admittedly, 6 months. So admittedly, I wasn't sure about that. But when we had talked, that was kind of at least that was the goal in mind. And so what about Illinois?
Well, one of the things is that I'm glad that you actually brought that up, because Illinois was one of the first states that actually came out with a social equity program within their license. And so in doing so, the only other states that had gotten to that space was Colorado and California. And Colorado began with their Compassionate Care Act that went to the back window the moment that they became recreation. And California had a host of their own issues of how it is that they rolled out with it, because it was based on, the jurisdiction is not the word I'm looking for, but it was based on, the different areas. California is broken up into so many different counties, if you will.
Right.
And so it was broken up in that space. So everyone really was looking to Illinois and how Illinois was going to be the first one to actually really have a quote unquote set aside or really deal with social equity. But that came out to be a smoke and mirrors and just really a watered down brand name to put on the war on drugs. Let's just call it social equity. But no one really knew what social equity was. No one's ever really created something called social equity. When you really break the word down, social equity is equity that's distributed socially amongst the community that hasn't received any financial gain or a resource, right? But that's the direct opposite of what we've seen. And with every state looking to Illinois and how Illinois rolled it out, trying to, again, be first to market and roll it out and be quick, states were just really, if people pay attention, what was happening is every state that then had a recreational bill, they took that bill as a template and then they made minor amendments to fit whatever politically that state wanted to happen for them and their bottom line. And unfortunately, that structure that Illinois had was a very loose structure, because the people that were writing it weren't really actively people that had partake into the culture that had been going on since the beginning of time.
No, they just saw a green rush and wanted to get in.
And so then when you look at these larger states that after Illinois, you have Massachusetts, right? You have, at that point, you had New Jersey, which is a shit show. You have Arizona, right? You have
Connecticut.
You have Connecticut.
Right.
Thank you. You have Connecticut.
Yeah,
and then going back, now you round back, you have California.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why we decided to do a lawsuit is, first and foremost, the attorney at the time had approached us because we were one of the few groups that was extremely vocal on a national level. And really in Illinois, that was like, we are not going to continue taking this bullshit and taking crumbs, because that's what you're doing. And you're able to manipulate the political system in order to change the rules in the middle of people applying who gave up their life savings to do this. Some of them, put second mortgages on their homes. Some of them got rid of their homes and started back renting.
Mm-hmm.
Just so that they can apply to have an opportunity that was never an opportunity because it was already fixed if you were politically connected. So it wasn't just something that we saw in Illinois. We started seeing it happen in a wave across other states that were trying to establish a social equity program or a social equity arm. Unfortunately, at that time, our attorney had found out that, and we did a monopolization lawsuit based on the Clayton Tax Act, which really described how organizations shared directives that were on shared boards. So let's say Verano had board members that were also a part of Cresco or a part of GTI.
Right.
And that's how they were able to share price notes and things like that, so that then they can monopolize and price gouge at the end of the day. And so once we came out with a lawsuit, of course, they ended up scrambling and releasing information that wasn't yet given to the public. And then they actually removed some of those board members that were shared between other entities. And per our attorney, with us having this case, their stocks dropped at least 70%. So they thought that, that was the win. That's as big as we're going to get it, because at this point, they've already made the changes. So we no longer have monopolization from them. Unfortunately, what other states have seen at this point is that these same large multi-state corporations, we like to call them a true social equity, MSCs, not MSOs, because someone coming into the industry who is from legacy, our goal is to be a multi-state operator at the end of the day.
Right.
We just don't want to be pushed out the way into the wayside by the corporations.
Mm-hmm.
But what ended up happening is that a lot of these executives within these corporations started to merge together, go into these other states with all the money that they took from Illinois and that they've already been making, and then do the exact same thing that they did in Illinois to these other states. So we still see a chain of monopolization occurring. What we're watching is the establishment of the American cartel. True Social Equity and Cannabis was the only group that called what was happening on the political corruption side in Illinois as the Chicago Cannabis Cartel. And if you extrapolate that out, you're watching the American cannabis cartel being created.
Man.
And right after that, they started doing hashtag, what did they say? MSO gang. I don't know.
I've seen that.
Right after we did our lawsuit, they started to try to flip it and make it seem like it was not a bad thing.
And it's funny to say that it's okay to have a corporate corrupt gang, but if you come to the inner city in the hood, and our gangs are labeled as, we can be political prisoners of war, which is some fucked up ass shit, if you ask me.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. It's really, it's more offensive, I think, to sort of take the term gang and to try and use that in this effort to change people's minds about the fact that what you're doing is wrong. That all of that is completely.
Well, let me just respond to that, because at the end of the day, it's not necessarily offensive, because we as people that actually have community organizations, the government labeled us as gangs. And they did so that they can take our leaders out and imprison them so that we can't lift our mindsets for our community to reestablish a thriving community versus a struggling community, which we see, and why violence is at an all-time high.
What does Illinois need to do to, let's say, I might be a long list, so believe me, you can just kind of give me like the top one or two or three or anything. But in your minds, what could Illinois do today, tomorrow, the next day, immediately to kind of get the state market into a really, truly socially equitable place? What would you guys like to see?
Well, first and foremost, I believe that every state, that on a federal level, there should have been set aside for people that were truly affected by the war on drugs, right? Especially if they're going to legalize it based on that. That's first and foremost. Second off, releasing anyone that has that are currently incarcerated or behind the wall with any cannabis conviction. And then we need to reestablish what that looks like, because if we're talking about releasing an amnesty for that, then you also have to look at guns and how it is that most people that were either labeled as a cannabis dope dealer probably also had a gun charge. That kind of comes with the uniform, if you will, almost like being a police officer. After that, it would have been great to have no caps at all. Yeah. Why do we have to be capped on growing a plant? It should have been looked at as a tomato at that sense, because if you do that, not everybody wants to have a whole yard of tomatoes. The same way that not everybody is going to want to sell their tomatoes to in like a grocery store. They might want to sell them to the people on the block. So the market, if you will, would have taken care of itself, because not everybody can be at every place. Mm-hmm. There's learning curves that are there. There's desire to be there. There's financial assets there. The other thing that could have been done is actually providing financial resources in order to help those that have been affected by the war on drugs or in the legacy and traditional market, to have resources financially to sustain themselves through the process. And then afterwards, in order to get them actually operational, up and running. None of those things occurred. What Illinois also could have done is not manipulate and corrupt and try to switch and change lanes in the beginning of people applying, to have all of a sudden we have new rules and regulations that have to be followed. And it would have been great to have an actual oversight, department that was there.
And also, let's be clear, this didn't just happen with the social equity recreational licenses. This started in medical. Mm. I mean, I looked to apply for a medical license because I was in the industry back then, and it was $250,000 to apply.
What?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I and three of our friends from the South Side, we just recently applied for the rec 3 years ago, and we spent $110,000 total with the lawyer fees, with the consultant fees. We put in 2 applications, which was $5,000, but everything else was, it's just the costs. And we put all of our savings into this,
And mind you, everyone who's listening, this whole process had to be done in 8 weeks.
Yeah.
They literally gave us a very short limit of time to damn near write a dissertation about our plans and how we were going to roll it out. And then we had to have these guidelines in order to follow. And they wanted all these specifics, and yet there's no oversight. They call it regulation, which I hate that word because regulation puts restrictions. I like to use the word compliance. Mm. Compliance then allows for safe wellness that's there for the communities. And that wasn't there at all. And to Anna's point, she's absolutely right. This started way back in medical. And that's one of the things that the other states that we wanted to do here in Illinois, not just True Social Equity and Cannabis, but other organizations that were standing at the beginning during advocacy and speaking out about this. We wanted to make sure that other states didn't adopt the same process. And if they saw it coming, at least they knew what to expect so they could get in front of it. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, that corporate corrupt monster got a leg up and
got the money.
Right, they were already down that line.
Yeah. And so we actually called for in April to stop corporate cannabis, and we did that lawsuit. And I can't remember what our demand. We had a lot of demands at the time, and we did a national protest, and ultimately only 3 states ended up participating, which is fine because getting people together on a few goals is difficult. But then a few months later, another group or another person was like, hey, let's get all these groups together and do this national protest. And we were like, yes, that's what we've been doing. So then even more groups started joining us. And we decided that this past September was Protest Corporate Cannabis Month. And we did multiple rallies and protests and press conferences throughout the country in Maine, Connecticut, New York,
Michigan.
Michigan. Yeah. We banded on three things: decriminalization, freedom and amnesty for all cannabis lockups, and home grow for all, regardless of the quantity. People should be able to grow as many fucking plants as they want.
Wow.
Sorry, I didn't ask about cursing on this.
No, it's fine. I'm okay with it. I'll click the little E box so people know that explicit language is in there, but otherwise it's totally fine by me. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say we didn't mention in the list of horrible states Florida. We have to list Florida,
right?
Because they have Trulieve, and what I'm hearing now is Trulieve basically took over all of Florida's cannabis, and now they're heading into Arizona, which is already corporatized, but now they're planning on just buying up all of them too. So we need to keep our eye out for Trulieve and do not support them.
Got it.
Or any corporate cannabis.
Yes.
Got it. That's a great point, and I just want to say to something that you mentioned earlier, Anna, just about the startup costs, at least here in Illinois, that they try and sort of hang onto anybody who's trying to get in on an official capacity to the cannabis industry. To call that in any way equitable, to have equity as a part of that, and to then say to people that, oh, but by the way, you need to have, a lawyer get all the paperwork done. You need to come up with $250,000. You need to, wrangle all the paperwork, write a dissertation, get it in 8 weeks. To make people kind of have to do that limbo game and try and bend themselves into that thing and call it equitable is such a joke. And
then lie and then not grade it in the proper way that it was supposed to is disheartening and a slap in the face and disrespectful from our political leaders, because basically they're looking at us like, look at these fools who thought they had an opportunity, who never actually had one. But we'll take your money and not give it back to you.
Right. And what's even more offensive is they made a system that basically forced people who are social equity into the hands of corporations to utilize them and use them as their tokens on their app.
Their goal is for social equity to then partner with these equitable corporations.
Right.
Why do we have to do that? We shouldn't be forced to do that at all. I mean, one of the things that from the beginning, I've always said, we need to halt the process and start again, because if from the beginning it was rolled out incorrectly, and it was never for me about this particular license, as it has shown that more people care about versus the generational opportunity and access that's going to be there. What about 10 years down the road when our kids are growing up? I have a 5 and a 7 and an 8-year-old. She just turned 8. That when they grow up and they want to also take on mom's business, right? And now all of a sudden rules and everything like that have changed because we didn't do our job at the beginning to see the rollout happen, to set it up for them in the right way. That's always what happens within our communities and us as citizens with the government. We never stay in the beginning and stay grounded to make sure, no, we're not going to follow in line with the smoke and mirrors that y'all are giving us. And then we look back 10 years down the road, now we have all these regulations that really are just restrictions for us, and then we are left with crumbs.
And on a little bit on that note, Vi, I was just reading a Politico article talking about how the mesh work and this mess of interstate markets trying to kind of work, not necessarily work together, but the companies that are doing the MSC stuff, this might all end up being settled in the courts anyway, because Congress is the only one that has the jurisdiction, I suppose, to
and always cared about the people so much.
Exactly. But I would say that it's possible that this all becomes so messy, and the courts, if a court does end up throwing things out, if we ever get a federal cannabis legalization, if it does become federally decriminalized and legalized, that may supersede these state markets, and then eventually everyone has to kind of conform to that, right? Is that a possibility?
Let me just address the article that you are talking about, because I think so that's basically the corporations lobbying to have interstate commerce, so that all of the crap.
They're not looked at as trafficking like we are when we cross state lines in our vehicles in order to go deliver our goods and services.
Also, because it's specifically for corporations, it's not going to help anyone else but corporations. So no, we should not allow that.
Okay. No, I see. I get that. That's a valid point. I didn't necessarily think about that angle from it. I kind of got something else from it, but I think that's a valid point. I really do. It could be just the corporations lobbying for it.
Absolutely. And then the banking issue, also, like, they're talking about that in Illinois too. And I'm like, there is a bank in Illinois that expanded recently nationally. I think it's I can't remember the name of it, but I spoke to the head of the person who does it, and they were just in Las Vegas. I saw them. They take cannabis money. They help you bank. So, like, there are banks that are dealing with cannabis money. Sure, they're charging a shit ton of fees. And
a lot of these, to clarify that though, a lot of these banks are credit unions, because credit unions fall in a different category where a conventional bank has to follow with their FDIC and things like that. So yes, there are banks that you can utilize, but again, as she was saying, there's so much red tape and they're overly expensive for no reason.
Sure.
I shouldn't say for no reason. They're taking, in their brains, they're taking all the risk.
The reason's there, but right, it's not a good reason. Yeah,
they make so much money off people, so much, especially the fact that they started in Illinois, and I just heard they expanded to multiple states. And they have only one director in charge of all of that. They make a whole bunch of money, and they aren't paying their staff.
Wow. That's bad for sure. So just I want to just kind of sum up. You mentioned the press conferences you guys had last month in September nationally. Very exciting. And those three main issues you guys rallied around again. Would you mind just saying those one more time? What were the major things?
Yes, decriminalization federally, as well as amnesty for all those who are currently incarcerated federally, obviously, as well as within the states, as well as home grow for all without any caps or restrictions, so that you can grow as much as you want or as less as the fuck that you want.
Right.
And those were the only three things that we could come together in different states around the country, because unfortunately, there's so much segregation and separation here within this as well, the same way that the system has, right? Because that's the only way that the system works, honestly, believe it or not. It has to work that way, because if it worked differently, then we wouldn't see the things that we see, with some having, some not having, and some kind of having.
Right. Yeah. And I wanted to just bring those up again, mainly because I feel like those are three things that I do feel like everybody can come together on. Decriminalization.
If you can't come together on those types of things, then you're not really for cannabis at all, and you're not really for wellness. And you need to get the fuck out the industry or the market.
Right, exactly. No room for that. But decriminalization, amnesty, and home grow for all, I think those three are just, anybody can agree on those. Any people in it for the right reasons, definitely.
And that's what we're pushing from now until election time, because ultimately it's necessary for us to have that. I understand, we understand those that apply for the license and want to be up and operational. And we support those who are totally true social equity in that regard, that have really got it out the mud and made it something. Unfortunately, that's far few and in between. When you look at the disparity that a lot of these states are calling to wait for the disparity study so that we can see what's wrong, so then we can correct it at that point. We don't need that, because if you look at the industry as a whole, it's less than 3% that is Black and brown or minority at all, Black, brown, and women.
If you look at the 185 dispensary licenses that were just released after 3 years,
right,
in Illinois, over half of them are owned by the same 35 companies.
Wow.
So that means multiple companies have multiple licenses, where almost about 1,000 people applied. So it could have been 185 groups all got a license, but instead we see some people with 6 licenses.
That is crazy. And I'm glad you brought that up too.
Or 12.
Yeah,
and
right.
The law only states 10. And then those other 2, they get a choice of where they go back to. And then the other downside of that are those in Illinois that actually did get a social equity license and trying to open up after they had to wait all this fucking time because of lawsuits and just the political system just sitting on their fucking hands. They only have 180 days in order to open up once they get awarded their license.
Right.
And if those 180 days get reached, their license goes back to the state. And so now what was a social equity license could be a non-social equity license at that point, or just bought out.
Wow, I didn't realize that, and that definitely is one of those political loopholes that people talk about all the time, because that's ridiculous. And I do want to say, to that point, the 185 licenses, I saw something just a few days ago that was this big celebration of the first craft grower social equity in Rockford. I think it was Starbuds was the name of it, and that's a good thing for that person. But
that's amazing for her.
Yes,
for them.
yes. But the fact that here we are 3 years after legalization and rolling out of the program, and we have one in the state craft grow social equity licensed operator, I think that really paints the picture of what legal cannabis in Illinois is right now and what it's been.
Definitely. And mind you, there has been a plethora of other social equity craft growers that haven't opened up. Why one? Why not all of them that actually were quote unquote awarded?
Well, I actually asked. I asked on, because I saw that too, and I was like, how did they open up when all of the other groups are begging the state for the grant money that they were supposed to get? And then someone was like, well, they already had their bagging, and I'm like, well, yeah, obviously they already had their backing. They didn't need
which
money.
is not a bad thing, especially if their backing, also has synchronicity and alignment with being legacy or social equity, right? That's amazing. The problem is when one is tokenized and then the whole is still fighting the barrel.
Right. And
become crabs in a barrel.
Exactly. And that's kind of how it looked. That's how it is now in Illinois, is that it's just, and not
just Illinois, that's how it is around the nation. And that's not how it was, quote unquote, given to us, and the propaganda of how it was coming out for us to buy into. Most of us had hope that this was going to be something that was like, oh man, we got duped, because we forgot that we're in a corrupt political city and state. That how could we believe that they're going to follow what the fuck they say?
Governor, and he's a billionaire, so he can't be bribed because he has all the money in the world. So, and he specifically said that he wanted to give generational wealth to the Black and brown community, and he ran on that.
Ran on that.
The last 3 years, he has been fucking crickets. No anything from JB fucking Pritzker other than propaganda. Illinois has the best social equity program in the country. That's all he says.
Yeah, it's as we just pointed out, for the many different reasons, that is wrong and offensive because of the way that things have rolled out. And anybody who's involved and tried to get involved in this legal cannabis here knows that very, very well. Anna Rose and Vi Herring of True Social Equity in Cannabis, thank you both so much for jumping on the show today and just kind of sharing the missions of your group and what you guys want to see in a U.S. legal cannabis market across the country.
I got one more thing. So
Sure.
We also have a group called Weed the People, THAPPL.
Nice.
And we are currently collecting people who are interested in running for any kind of office in throughout the country to run under, no fucking corruption.
Right. So
freeing the plant and freeing the people.
So if people are interested, how can they get involved in Weed the People?
So right now we're just on Instagram and Facebook. Holler at us, message us. We're still finding our core group of people that are going to be kind of like the A
team at the end of the day, because we're currently writing policy that not only for Illinois, but for federally as well, that hopefully, everyone can get behind as we roll it out, speaking about the three main things that we talked about here today and expounding upon that. But really, we're looking for people that are trying to have new thought leadership in their thinking to create more progressive and inclusive and equitable laws for us as a people for our future, and who also, really care about the environment, and that environment meaning the environment outside of us as well as the environment inside of us, mind, body, and spirit.
Right on. And that I believe that'll resonate with a lot of people. And thanks again for both of you for the work that you're doing. And thank you again for jumping on the show and just kind of sharing your journeys and the goals with everybody. And anyone listening, check out Weed the People on Instagram and Facebook and get involved if you feel it. Anna and Vi, thanks again. Really hope to talk to you guys in the future.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Peace and love.
Thank you so much. touched on.
And there you have it. I want to thank again my guests Vi Herring and Anna Rose of True Social Equity in Cannabis, as well as Weed the People. And you can find both of those groups on Facebook or Instagram. I have links to their page in the show description notes, but you can certainly just search them on either platform and check out what they're doing. They've got some events coming up, some protests, demonstrations, and like I've said, I think their motivation, they're coming from the right place, and they have the right stuff in mind there. And the three things they're asking for are not crazy. There's nothing crazy about no license caps, amnesty for cannabis crimes, and home grow for all. I think those are absolutely baseline, totally agreeable. Now, I have talked on the show before about license caps. It is a debatable topic, certainly. I've mentioned that in places like Colorado and Michigan, the free nature of licenses has sort of led to the product value dropping down. And you've literally got Colorado, the union there of cannabis growers, the union is asking for a moratorium on licenses. So that to me says that if the people who are growing there don't want licenses out anymore, that tells you something about what happens to the value of cannabis when anybody can grow and get their stuff on dispensary store shelves. So my point being, the nature of no license caps, that's a debatable topic. But home grow for all and amnesty for all cannabis crimes, that to me is baseline, totally agreeable, and I believe that everybody should get behind those things 100%. One more thing before I let you go this week, listener. There was something that came up about a month ago. There was a press conference in New York, and the recently elected mayor, Eric Adams, there had an interesting sort of reaction to a smell that popped up during his press conference, and I wanted to share that with you.
One thing for sure, one law that was passed is clearly being practiced right now, because I smell some weed. Someone is smoking. Someone is smoking. All right.
I just wanted to share that with you, listener, because the visual of this mayor who has behind him several people in suits as well as a police captain, it looks like, with the cap. Everybody's there. This is an official New York City press conference, and to have him kind of come up there and just be like, man, does it smell like some weed here? And then just kind of crack up. I just love that, and I think that it really, that 5 seconds, that 5-second clip just highlights how far we really have come and how different a place, how different a world we live in American cities now in 2022. And things are changing all the time. More and more states are legalizing cannabis, and it is just a very exciting time if you, like me, are a cannabis enthusiast and have wanted to see these changes made in the world. They're happening right now, baby, and they're going to continue. So let's be thankful for that and be thankful for all the positive things in your life. It's great to just kind of hold on to some gratitude, really feel that in your stomach. You know, somebody who you love, imagine what it feels like to hug that person, some activity you love spending time doing. You know, imagine if you couldn't do that thing, or, you know, something that you love, whether it's consuming or just spending time, some place that you enjoy that really makes you feel glad to be on earth. Think about those things, hold them in your mind this Thanksgiving week, and just know that, as much as things sometimes feel like they're down in the dumps and aren't getting any better, they are. They are. Things are changing, and things are getting better. Change is truly the only constant, and we are witnessing great change right now. Thank you again so much for listening, and I'll be back again next week with another episode of the Cannabis Man Podcast. Bye-bye. Cannabis Man is an original production of myself, Don Kleppen. Original theme music by Yusu Kim, a.k.a. Goodson. Other music by Pat Perez, and logo designed by Vorbroker Media. If you like the show, please rate, review, subscribe, and share whenever you can.